the ACC title game picture. Half of the reservation has been made for Charlotte. That's Notre Dame. Welcome back inside Keyshawn, Javel, and Zubin. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. It's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Let me run straight through the ACC scenario, and then we'll get to the more juicy scenario with Jay and the Ohio State University. So let's run through what's going on here. Notre Dame has clinched a spot in the ACC championship game. If you're unaware this year, if you're just kind of a casual fan, just sort of like, wait a minute, Notre Dame, this year, because of the pandemic, they were invited to essentially say you can participate in the ACC championship game. Normally they play 5 or 6 games a year, but they're not eligible for the conference championship game. This year they are. They have 2 games left on their schedule, or they did. They had Syracuse and Wake Forest in order. The Wake Forest game essentially has been taken off the schedule. It's been canceled. They have Syracuse left this weekend, but it doesn't really matter because they've got the goose egg. They're perfect. They can afford a loss. They're already in. Not that they're going to lose to Dino Babers and the Orange. So that's the deal. They are in. Clemson is going to get in if all they have to do is knock off their one remaining opponent on Saturday, Virginia Tech. Their game against Florida State, you might remember that tete-a-tete between Mike Norvell and Dabo Swinney. You're scared. It's an excuse. The coronavirus. The league essentially said, fellas, cut the chit-chat. We're not playing the game.
Yep.
So Clemson has 1 game left against Virginia Tech. They win that game, and then it's going to be Clemson and Notre Dame on December 19th in Charlotte in a rematch of the Instant Classic earlier this season. I bring up our boy Ed Reed. Some love for Jay. If, it's impossible, I think, but if Clemson were to lose, Miami could actually still sneak into the ACC title game. So it's not just sealed yet for the Tigers, but it probably will be by the end of Saturday. Where it gets really interesting, of course, is Ohio State. We've been talking about it. You know about it. The 6 games. Can they get there? What's going to happen if they don't get there? It was addressed last night on the College Football Playoff Rankings Show, 2nd edition. Gary Barta is the selection committee chairman. He's also the athletic director at Iowa. I wanted to just point that out since we're talking about a fellow Big Ten school. And he discussed how difficult it is to really size up Ohio State if the games just aren't there.
Well, as everybody knows, we did not have an additional game to evaluate this week. So the last game we watched was a good win over Indiana. A lot of discussion about the number of games that a team plays. And it's not anybody's fault, but trying to evaluate a team that has 4 games in versus a team that has 7, 8, or 9 games in is definitely a problem.
And Jay, this is a problem they're going to have to address and figure out.
Well, I said this at the beginning of this whole conversation, Jay, at the beginning of the season. How can you possibly put a team in with less wins than a team, less games played than somebody else? If I play 9 games and you play 4 or 5 or even 6, I still kind of have a bit of an issue with that because I'm only seeing a certain sample size. At 4-0, you get to 5-0, and then all of a sudden, Alabama and Notre Dame both are playing 8 and 9 games, and Clemson's playing 8 and 9, and Florida's and A&M's are playing 8 and 9 games, and you're only playing 5, and I'm supposed to just let you in?
Well, here's where I get really concerned for Buckeye fans, because I am a Buckeye fan, is that so the game versus Illinois was canceled. Mm-hmm. Ryan Day has COVID. They're working through that. The head coach for the Ohio State. You play Michigan State next. Michigan is going through. They shut down their facilities. That's your next game. Mm-hmm. That's 2 weeks from now, but who knows if that can escalate where that will be. If that game gets canceled, you're looking at Ohio State at 5 games, all right, at 5-0, if they're able to get there. Here's where it gets concerning is that the committee in the first week that they came out with the rankings, Zubin, they had Ohio State behind Clemson at 1 loss. So there's already a precedent set. Like, all right, one loss team, even though DJ threw for 350 plus yards and that game came down to the wire, they lost to Notre Dame, Clemson was still ahead of Ohio State. So then you look at the scenario. What happens if Florida, who still has their own destiny in their own hands, by the way, if they knock off Alabama in the SEC championship game? Then you're looking at a scenario where Ohio State could be on the outside looking in because you will have Notre Dame, Clemson, Bama, and Florida in the college football playoffs.
The Ohio State ranking, when they first came out, I'm sure that the committee looked at where they would end up, not where they would be right today, because they didn't anticipate that there would be games being canceled or postponed. They didn't think about 3-4 weeks later what would happen if Michigan, something happens to Michigan. I'm sure they didn't look at that and say, okay, they're not going to get to the 6th game. They're just going to have 4 or 5 games. So I'm not really that Clemson is ahead of them with 1 loss. Clemson's probably a better football team than Ohio State with Trevor Lawrence at quarterback.
Okay, but that is still subjective, though. That's your opinion, right? I mean,
that's what they're going on.
I know that's exactly my point, though.
They're going on their opinions and being subjective at what they're looking at.
So then you're looking at games like, okay, they beat Pittsburgh by Penn State by 13. They were dominating that game, and IU came back, even though Penix now is out, which
Penn State's a bad football team this year.
I understood.
So they're
looking at it. Yes, I'm just saying Ohio State could find themselves on the outside looking in, even though they would be undefeated.
For the
but
numbers,
not really undefeated though, Jay. They only played 4 or 5 games against. Give me the schedule again. Who they play?
So they beat Nebraska. They beat Penn State. They beat Rutgers. Their game against Maryland was canceled. They beat IU, top 10 team. Their game against Illinois was canceled. Michigan State, they play next, and then Michigan. But so then you're going to fault them for. I mean, you always say that you can only play the teams in front of you.
But
right?
I'm not the committee, and the committee is looking at strength of opponents, all of those sort of things. You look at Nebraska.
But your
Nebraska
strength of opponents are only in your conference, so it's not. There's no non-conference game. So to what extent do you have to kind of say, all right, your strength of your opponents, we can't really value that the same because if you can't do that the same, right?
I mean, I guess you can though, because if you're looking at they struggled initially against Nebraska, then they blew them away. Then you look at Indiana, which is having like a Cinderella type season. They're playing great. They let them come back into the game. Penn State's a bit of a dog right now, so everybody's signing up for Penn State to take laps around them. And then who else did you say that was there that they played?
They played Michigan State and then
Michigan State. I mean, I don't know that they're strong. I know that they beat Michigan or whatever, and they had a miracle victory, and people was all like, yeah. But then that was it.
All right, we'll get into that a lot more later this morning. On the way, what do you think the front offices are thinking right now between Baltimore and Pittsburgh? They've had a lot to manage. A guy that's been there for sure takes us inside what's going on at the top of both organizations. After Key has this from Granger.
For the ones who keep people and property safe, there's Granger. Granger is your experienced safety partner, offering supplies and solutions for every industry, as well as the latest equipment, safety assessments, training, and more. All backed by free access to product specialists, 24/7 support, and an unwavering commitment to helping you keep your facility safe and your people even safer. Learn how Granger can assist you in creating a culture of environmental, health, and safety excellence in your workplace. Click Granger.com/safety, or just stop by. Granger, for the ones who get it done.